When in January of 2020, a 911 line operator answered a call, he was met with the usual alarm tone of someone asking for help. "There's a guy at my front door, he's been harassing me for months," said the voice of a young man, almost shouting. Immediately, a group of police officers headed to the location from where the call for help came. And indeed they found a middle-aged man with grey hair who had illegally entered a property. But this didn't seem like the typical case of a prowler caught red-handed. The grey-haired man was a renowned national broadcasting company journalist who claimed to be there to catch a sexual predator who, along with his partner, was doing terrible things to boys and girls. The predator turned out to be none other than the one who had made the call asking for help. Who was telling the truth? To that doubt, another factor was added. The subject, who remained hidden inside his house and had dialed 911, was even more well known than the journalist, only among a younger audience. It was the YouTuber Onision, active on the platform since its inception and with millions of followers. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Onision's story renews an old debate about the safety of minors on the internet and the false impressions that are sold online. How was Onision able to operate for so many years without anyone discovering his true intentions? What clues about his actions were there in his own videos? To what extent? The absurd and controversial humor he showed in front of the cameras did not reveal the abuses he was committing. Why didn't the platform take him down when the first reports appeared on the network? To answer these questions, we're going to delve into the dark case of Onision. Greg, the outcast Onision, is an elusive figure if you try to dig into his past and his life before YouTube. At some point, it seems like his username erased all previous traces of the person, as if the character really had eaten up all the previous identity. But some clues have been scattered on, of course, the internet, and it is from them that you can start answering little by little. The question is, who is or was Onision before becoming a public figure? It is known that this person was born on November 11th, 1985 in Auburn, Washington, and his name is well known to his followers. Greg. However, it is also known that at some point in his adolescence, he stopped identifying with his birth name, Gregory James Daniel, to adopt the surname Jackson. Probably, Daniel reminded him too much of his father, and by the time Greg was about 15 years old, the relationship with his father was completely broken. Truth be told, Onision was never very close to his dad, who was quite absent throughout his childhood. However, this is not just about someone receiving little affection. There was an act of violence that would change everything. For Randy Daniel, Greg's father, the divorce from his ex-wife had been because he worked too much. But Onision himself told a very different story. He said that his parents' separation, when he was just 4 years old, was due to a terrible news that had come to light. Apparently, Randy had abused a little girl. Onision recorded several videos detailing his father's alleged crimes, though the story was never entirely clear. He claimed that this never happened and that he has no criminal record. Greg was raised in a fairly fractured family environment. Despite everything, he was a cheerful, outgoing child who everyone described as very likable. But his parents' separation took a toll, and something in him exploded around the age of 15. For reasons that are not clearly known, Greg's mom kicked him out of the house and the teenager ended up at his father's home. Despite some distance, they maintained contact, and although the idea of living together did not seem to excite either of them, other alternatives were notably absent. At that point, Randy was seeing a girl named Debbie. She knew that the teenager had some behavioral issues and his attitude was becoming quite unruly. They believed they were still in a position to get him back on track, as long as they committed to doing so and took action promptly. By then, Greg was already a typical internet kid. Home computers were all the rage in the 90s, and for him, that emerging network was his place in the world. From a young age, he spent countless hours at his computer, creating a wealth of content for online forums and blogs. In his teens, he began to notice that his online antics not only gained the acceptance of others, but also some admiration. He was unknowingly laying the groundwork for the power he would soon wield over countless people. But before Onision came to light, much more disturbing and earthly things happened on the other side of the screen. A few months after moving in with his father, the family had planned a vacation in Tennessee. Everything was perfect until Greg, with the car packed full of luggage, had a sudden change of heart. He said he'd rather stay at home to use his computer and be with his brand new girlfriend. Randy and Debbie were surprised, because up until that point the boy had seemed excited about the trip. That he suddenly became stubborn and capricious again was not something they saw in a good light. Randy thought it was time to set some boundaries with his son and forced him to go with them. Despite his complaints, Greg spent much of the trip angry and throwing passive-aggressive comments from the back seat of the car. Seeing that no one on the other side was responding to him, he chose to insult his father's girlfriend. Then, Randy hit the brake and they stopped at a gas station. What happened next has two versions, the father's and the son's. According to Greg, after exiting the car, they argued until his father grabbed him by the neck and choked him. In Randy's words, Greg was the first to hit him and he just shook him off to get him off. But both accounts converge on the fact that Greg beat him up on the ground, Debbie called the police, and the officers immediately intervened. Before the judge, Greg reiterated that his father attempted to strangle him. But the authorities noticed that something was not right with the boy and sent him to a juvenile correctional facility. It would be the first time that Greg would face the concrete consequences of his own aggressiveness. But would he learn the lesson? In the following years, he would build a solid facade brick by brick to hide his true personality. He would create an intricately designed online persona to maintain control. The important thing was simply that, to be able to deceive the environment to achieve the goals. In February of 2005, 3 former PayPal employees uploaded a website known as YouTube. In less than 2 years, they sold it for $1.658 billion size. Was the idea that profitable? But in those early years, it was a few young people who noticed the potential of the page. One of them was Onision. His first videos date back to 2004, and at that time he uploaded them to his own website emerald.com. On January 29, 2006, he launched his first YouTube channel and started creating content specifically for that platform. In parallel, many things were happening in his life. In high school, he had met a girl named Sky Tantaga, whom he married in 2005 at the age of 20. They began brainstorming funny ideas for video content. But during those months, Greg decided to suddenly change his routine and join the Air Force. Interestingly, Greg Jackson continued uploading material to YouTube while developing his military career. He was not yet very well known, but he had secured a loyal community. In 2008, while on a mission in South Korea, the young man decided that weapons weren't for him. At least not the ones that really shot, instead of with a post-production special effect. Thus, he decided to end his military career and declared himself. A conscientious objector is a person who opposes performing an act or service for ethical, religious, or philosophical reasons. With this clarified, he only had YouTube left and directed all his attention there. In April of 2008, Greg achieved his first viral. Although the phenomenon was not yet described with that word, it was with I'm So Emo song, a parodic theme. The following year would come his big boom, the Banana Song video, which to this day has 95 million views. Until then, Greg's wife Sky, who also had a YouTube channel, was more successful than him. But everything started to change at a certain point around the Banana Song. Somehow, Greg seemed to have a special talent for capturing the attention of an audience whose humor and interests were quite cryptic to the adult world. A niche was being created on the internet, especially on YouTube, that was growing exponentially and was about to explode as a gigantic cultural phenomenon. Something Onision knew how to read from the start. But he didn't just upload absurd sketches in which he played unbalanced or screaming characters or bizarre songs, he also spoke to the camera and poured out his increasingly controversial opinions. But there is a fact that is more than fundamental. Onision more than anything spoke to a female audience under 18 years old, and he did it by looking directly into the eyes of his followers. He spent hours talking to them about issues ranging from bullying to self-confidence. He almost profiled himself as a preacher, with YouTube as his pulpit. But what did he seek from his followers? In exchange for what did he give all those pieces of advice that seemed so well-intentioned? Basically, what was Onision hiding? Crashing pop. When did the Onision Speaks channel start to gain unexpected popularity? Greg Sky's marriage began to deteriorate. While they used to appear together on camera, most of the time they were in separate rooms, each on their own computer. As Onision's fame grew, he also started to receive more and more emails from followers, but one in particular caught his attention. It was from Shiloh Rand Hoganson, better known as Shiloh in the Canadian pop scene of the early 2000s. Shiloh's rising career appeared to suddenly end between late 2009 and mid-2010. The time when she started talking to Onision in the beginning, they were increasingly frequent Skype chats. Shiloh spoke daily with Greg and he seemed to understand her perfectly. Despite being 8 years older, Shiloh felt alone on tours, and the weight of her accelerated fame began to isolate her. But Onision promised her that everything would change. One day he put the divorce papers in front of his computer camera. He had ended things with Sky and was eager to travel and visit her right away. Onision cautiously carried her away as she felt overwhelmed. Shiloh had just turned 17, and for them to be together, it had to be in a place that permitted it. Thus, they agreed to meet in Pennsylvania, where the young singer was on tour. Onision took the first plane he could to that place, and took the first step in what he intended to show as a sweet love story. From then on, things accelerated. The YouTuber moved to Toronto, and Shiloh began to visit him almost daily. In 2011, they moved together to Washington. None of this was a secret, because Onision's life was almost entirely broadcasted on YouTube. Shiloh was trapped, but the fourth wall of her cell was a screen that thousands of users could see daily. In front of the camera, she accompanied her boyfriend in videos where she was seen in disguise, playing characters, but also being shot at, beaten, humiliated, all in the name of the internet's cryptic humor. Making monetized YouTube videos was already a highly profitable business. In 2011, it is estimated that Onision was earning $30,000 per month. Shiloh later recalled that he had not only given up music when he became involved in his troubling relationship with Onision. He cut ties with his mother, stopped seeing friends, and dramatically altered his appearance. Onision convinced him that wearing makeup was for prostitutes. And slowly Shiloh fell into a downward spiral that led her to collapse, and it was all recorded. Shiloh, trembling and looking lost, sought help, but her plight only fueled the public's morbid fascination. In a sadly remembered video, Onision put her in front of the camera and shaved her head live. By then, Shiloh was, in her own words, completely broken. The YouTuber, no longer able to humiliate her, got bored and left. In 2011, Shiloh shared her story, knowing Onision would persist. He had found a way of manipulating that he found addictive. 3 months later, the boy introduced his new girlfriend, Adrian. How had he met her? The girl was a follower of his channels, and he had written her an email. The story repeats itself, and that's how our story goes back to the beginning. Although the pattern could be the same, Adrian detected the warning signs. When Onision traveled hundreds of kilometers to meet her, the young woman felt things were getting too dark. She broke the bond and exposed Onision's toxic attitude. But he recorded a video accusing her of lying. Thus, his character became more and more confrontational. He fought with other YouTubers and enjoyed the exposure that the continuous scandals gave him. One of his favorite targets at that time was Eugenia Cooney, a content creator to whom he dedicated no less than 75 videos ridiculing her eating disorder. If you're interested in learning more about Eugenia Cooney, I invite you to watch the video we made about her on this channel. We'll leave the link. In the end, Onision was already positioning himself as a polemicist always on the edge, leaving nothing to chance. That was what sold him the most at the end of 2011. Another event in his personal life would be crucial to grasping all that shaped the character. A 17-year-old follower, who at that time identified as a woman, contacted him from New Mexico, and Onision knew that another prey had fallen into his net. Greg moved to a state where the age of consent was 17. By the following year, they were already married. Onision was already a debated topic online, and not precisely for his humorous videos and songs or the controversy surrounding his views. Something strange could be seen in all the girls with whom he had shared screen, a pattern that was beginning to be disturbing and repetitive. Onision didn't seem to be simply a proud boyfriend showing off his partners and boosting them as public figures, but rather a king of manipulation. At that moment, an old-school journalist, that is, from television, had landed on YouTube and was especially interested in digging into this guy's story. Something in all those tons of material he had online disturbed him. It wasn't just a generational misunderstanding. Chris Hansen, who in his career had investigated quite a few police cases, believed that a sexual predator could be hiding behind the figure of Onision. In the following years, he dedicated himself to closely watching, like thousands of other users around the world, the videos that Onision uploaded with his partner, who had a channel that was starting to become popular under the second female name she had adopted before transitioning. At that time, the talks between Onision and his new partner often revolved around sexual matters, and on many occasions, they were about the benefits of experimenting and adding other people to their daily life. Polyamory and gender identity began to gravitate in the long debates they had. Their life was so public that no one was surprised by Onision's partner's announcement to transition and become Kai, a trans man. Onision supported his partner, showing understanding and openness, and encouraging him to rediscover himself. Over time, their videos began to feature other actors. Girls evidently underage who appeared so frequently it seemed like they were living with them. But what was really happening? For Chris Evans and other users who had been following with concern the progress of Onision and Kai's channels, it was evident. Greg's tendency to associate with underage girls had already become a modus operandi, and Kai seemed to be the perfect link. He was the one who recruited them. 8 long years have passed since Onision's marriage to Kai, and all this dark web came to light. During that time, Kai started a relationship with a 15-year-old teenager named Regina, and immediately afterwards with another named Sarah. The process was identical in both instances. Both followed Kai, not Onision, and formed a bond that was initially friendly, but regular. They spoke every day by video call, and as the weeks went by, the conversations became more and more suggestive, until they were openly sexual. In both Regina's and Sarah's cases, Onision burst onto the scene to organize everything. Although no one knew, he was monitoring the conversations incognito. According to the two young women's allegations, both came from vulnerable homes, and Kai had always been understanding about their situation and willing to help them. He was so friendly and charming that at different times both had agreed to move into his house and of course share a roof with Onision. The goal was clear. The girls were being recruited to be part of a complex plot of subjugation and abuse, to which they arrived without being fully aware of what was happening. And in all cases it led to sexual abuse. By January of 2020, Chris Hansen had already spoken with many of Onision's ex-partners. He was convinced that this was a minor recruitment network. Especially on Twitter, users did not understand how the complaints circulating on the video web did not generate an immediate ban of the YouTuber. During the early days of the pandemic, Hansen decided to confront Onision and Kai at their house, camera in hand. He entered the front yard and knocked on the door, hoping to take it to the field, face to face. That kind of cat and mouse hunt which until then had only taken place on the internet. But Onision fought back. While Hansen was at his front door, he called 911 to report that he had been harassed for months by a man who had now broken into his property. The police arrived and Hansen had to move away from the house. Onision thought he had won, but Hansen was convinced that the victory was his. When the Onision scandal completely exploded, it seemed that his days on the network and even in freedom were numbered. But quite the contrary beyond that. Of public ridicule and the thousands and thousands of characters used to analyze his case on the internet, nothing else happened. Onision made controversial defenses in which he ridiculed the allegations against him and assured that he was not guilty of any of the crimes that Hansen and his ex-girlfriends accused him of. The idea that he was the head of a sort of pedophile network was amusing to him, and he took for granted that he would never pay for his sins. He wasn't entirely wrong, but soon reality would hit him where it hurt most: his online content. Demonetization and something more? The documentary series Onision in Real Life premiered on January 18, 2021, currently available on the platform Max, which compiled all the research done by Chris Hansen and with the testimony of the victims. Upon discovering the material, YouTube permanently demonetized the creator's channel. He had previously been banned from Patreon for posting private information of a follower who had reported him for abuse. It is estimated that up to that point, Onision had uploaded more than 6,000 videos and his total earnings were around $2.4 million. Today his account remains active, but Kai's has been deactivated. Most of the videos that talk about them on the rest of YouTube spread the allegations. Some claim that Onision practically generated a cult around himself, regardless of whether there was an openly religious element in his speech. Coercion was evidently the common thread in his rise to fame. And what did he rely on to attract and manipulate his victims? But so far, all the consequences of his behavior seem to be linked to the digital realm. What about the legal issue? Onision and Kai are facing formal complaints. As of recording this video, there are no major updates on the matter, although it would be logical that they are brought to trial in the medium term. One of the heaviest cases seems to be that of Sarah, one of his last victims, who presented her case to the Michigan court. Some details are known about the personal lives of Onision and Kai. The family resides in Washington with their son and daughter, and both YouTubers are under investigation by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which includes grooming and child abuse. They are also suspected of abusing their children. Will the case go to court, or will it just remain another murky internet story? Only time will tell. The question that keeps everyone awake now is, how many other Onisions have been or are in the vast virtual ocean? How many dangerous beings hide their true intentions behind tons of charisma? And even more importantly, how do we discover them before it's too late?